people would say, oh, you're so lucky you have this cultural heritage as an inspiration for your work. And I'd say, I don't understand. Like, what do you mean? And they're like, oh, well, you know what? We're just white. We don't have it. And I'm like, why on earth would you say that your experience or your heritage is a void? And so they'd say it again and again. They're like, oh, you know what I mean. I'm like, no, please explain this. I think that there's some things that Canadians wouldn't be able to talk about, especially Canadians and Americans, because they pride themselves on being like a really far less conservative than a lot of Asian countries or Middle Eastern countries. In my experience, there's things that they equally don't talk about. It's like they've been told their whole lives that they aren't allowed to feel for certain things. One is the spiritual. That's the biggest thing. Once I did this piece that was showing the body of my father's mother in front of her funeral pyre. And it was a soft sculpture. And it looked pretty real. Like when we put it in a gallery, they get phone calls every now and then at front desk security. Someone collapsed in the gallery. And they're like, no, it's a sculpture. And I love this sculpture. But one day my mom called me and she said, where is that sculpture? At that time it was in a gallery in Mississauga. She says, you bring it back and you never show it again. And I said, why? She said, I had a dream. Your grandmother was in it. You can't show it ever again. You have to promise me that you won't show it ever again. Now, forget the piece, forget the everything, this woman was just terrified, scared, moved. Some people say, oh, the superstitious is so stupid. I'm like, regardless of what you think of anything, this woman was moved to tears. Another idea of a gap that exists that vocabulary doesn't have is the appreciation of beauty and what various people's relationship is allowed to be to things that are beautiful. The way it's set up is very unsatisfying, as in we are not allowed to have a relationship to things that are beautiful. Like a lot of times beauty is linked to sexuality, but we organize our sexuality in these orientations because then people can link it to physiological responses that are very apparent. And if they're not there, then it's something that doesn't exist. In people, the beauty is, it's like moments. The moment she was in the sun, she had this on, the day was windy. It was that moment. We can't experience people as things, they're moments. One thing I always hear again and again that's kind of funny is mothers describe how they want to eat their babies. They're just like, your face, I love you so much, I just want to eat you. I'm like, yes, we want to eat the things that we think are beautiful, because how do we fill ourselves? We eat, you know? And not necessarily possessing, but being full by this. But we don't have vocabulary for these things. A lot of times they're linked to such small details in our life that we feel ashamed even trying to talk to people about it. All those parts that are too small in our life to ever really talk about. People's obsessive relationship with their pets. That's another domain. We can't talk about this when we have other things in our lives that should take precedent, but a lot of times all of these things manifest in the same spot. It's our heart. You know, it all goes to the core of us, but we don't talk about half of it most of the time. Then another thing that's connected, or we don't have vocabulary for, is the end of love. It's the biggest fear, but it's not something we speak about. What happens when that stops? What does it do to us when we believe that it's possible for those kinds of things to end? And we don't have a vocabulary for this? Well, there has to be a space for that. That's where art comes in. To say whatever we want. Oh, thank God that this medium exists, you know. Otherwise, I'd be screwed.